Hello, Orville Nation. Welcome, everybody. We have the dynamic duo themselves, Marc and Elaine Zicree, with us tonight. What a special treat. I want to say hello to Deej, to Gap, to Nerdtorial Flightform, to Adega, to everybody who is in the chat. Welcome, and everybody who's going to watch us on the replay. We have a great panel, great guests. And hello, War Dog Hines. Good to see you from the 7th Rule community. And of course, the 7th Rule, thanks to the 7th Rule community for introducing us last year to Marc and Elaine. If you guys haven't checked out the 7th Rule, you must. You guys know who they are. Just make sure you catch their streams, the review of DS9 with Sirach and Ryan. And welcome to William Jackson, Galinda, and everybody who is here. Let's get started. And here we go. Let's bring in a friend from the community. She is a sci-fi writer. I'm talking about the panelists. Let's bring in LJ, who you all know. Welcome, LJ. It's so nice to have you back, my sci-fi writing friend. Good to see you.
Hi, PJ. Hi, Orville Nation. It is so nice to see everyone again. I feel like it's been a long time.
Yeah, but it's been a long time since you've been on the stream. But of course, you've been in the chat, lurking. Yes. You've been, yes. You're always with us. And do you any updates with your stuff, LJ? With anything you're working on, or is it still top secret?
Still working on it. I'm excited to say that it's actually getting a lot closer to being finished and refined, and a lot of the little details that need to be getting done are getting done, and so that feels very positive. Hi, Nerdtorial Lifeform.
And of course, that's awesome. That's awesome. Anything on the horizon that you want to share?
Oh gosh, I think this has been the most exciting thing on the horizon, is getting to be back on the Orville Nation today. Okay. Nothing else to share currently, unfortunately.
Okay. It's awesome to have you, my friend. And of course, I'm getting the jokes from the jokes of getting. I'm gonna redshirt myself. I'm not gonna make it through the episode because I'm wearing a red shirt from all our Trekkie. Let's hope we make it through. I want to introduce this wonderful couple. They are the dynamic duo of sci-fi. Let's welcome, without further ado, Marc and Elaine Zicree. Welcome to you both.
Great. Thanks, PJ. Glad to be here.
It's an honor to have you here again. And if you guys haven't seen it, Marc joined us the other day for the Orville review, and that was very insightful. It was an honor to have Marc reviewing the Orville with us. Thank you, Marc.
Oh, it was the high point of my life. It was it's all downhill from here. So, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you, Elaine, for taking the time to join us.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Wow, this is a rarity. This is great. So yeah, absolutely.
I remember last year, Simone was on the panel with us, Simone Bailey, and she was just casually asking Marc about you, and you just decided to join us, and it was fabulous that you did.
Well, it's unusual. I'm a behind the scenes type person.
Yeah, but just to be clear, Elaine and I write, direct, and produce Space Command, and we're also writing, directing, and producing Sweet Haven, the show we're creating with Rockney O'Bannon right now. So it's a lot of fun, and then we each do projects on our own as well. So it's a very full life.
But Space Command is especially fun because it's an oh boy show. Which by oh boy I mean is that plot turn new enough? No, it's not quite new enough. I want to be able to feel, oh boy, I've never seen that before.
She's very good. Elaine will say to me, this script that you've written is well, in a word, it's not really good enough yet. No.
So does Elaine keep you grounded, Marc?
Yes. I would have floated off the planet many, many years ago without her. And again, for those who don't know, we've been together for 44 years, married for 43. And worked professionally together through most of that time. And so she met me when I was a college student. So she took a bigger gamble on me than I took on her. I mean, God knows what I would have turned out to be. So it was great. It's been a great.
Do you guys want to? I hate to say this, but when we have this wonderful couple here, do you guys want to share how you guys met? Can you say that, or
it's an involved story? Let us just say for now that we met through a mutual friend,
through a crazy mutual friend. But
yes, maybe we'll get to it in the interview. We'll see.
But I don't think so. But the thing that hit us both is we were both extremely enthusiastic people, and we're not somebody who likes to oh, we have to do, we just do what we'll get by. We both wanted things that
we're very ambitious.
We're more than ambitious. We love excitement, and the people that you would draw love excitement, like our design people, and we say we just want something we've never seen before.
Yeah.
So we get design people and actors.
So you mean the excitement of creation, not like the excitement of smoking crystal meth or something? No. Yeah, absolutely.
The excitement of creation. Well, creating something new and fresh and that has emotional power. And the one challenge sometimes of working in the industry is you get your vision diluted and diluted and diluted. And so when we say, hey, if artists want to join us, and you can always do your best work, because that's what we're excited about. If somebody designs something, it has to be something you want to own, or if we have a set, it has to be a place you want to go to, or a world you'd like to be in.
Yeah.
And if it's not something that we'd love to be in, or love to hold, or love to look at, then we just say, no, that's not. So that's not really good enough. So we both truly value excitement in what we create.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're very, very much on the same page. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. I didn't expect to already have a question for you, but let me just take let's just take this question for Norporeal Lifeform. Forbidden Planet review, how it compares to Trek and other sci-fi. Do you all see it as influentially underrated?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that my two favorite Star Trek movies are Forbidden Planet and Galaxy Quest. I think Forbidden Planet had an enormous influence on Star Trek. That, and also a TV show called Space Patrol that ran in the 50s. Roddenberry was, the fingerprints of both are all over Star Trek. But yet, Star Trek is its own thing. I mean, if they had done Forbidden Planet as a TV show, it would not have had the universal appeal that Star Trek did. But for anyone who has not seen Forbidden Planet, I strongly recommend it. And I got to interview Anne Francis, who starred in that movie when I wrote the Twilight Zone companion, and she was incredibly charming and wonderful in every way. Yeah. What do you think of Forbidden Planet?
Oh no, we both had a lot of fun with Forbidden Planet. It took these wonderful turns, and especially in its day. But I mean, even now, it had humor, and it had a fresh view of science fiction.
Yes.
And surprises. So it was really, something you can see over and over. So I think it is. That's sort of a taste test. Can you see it?
Right.
Have you seen it and said, well, that was nice? Or do you say, oh, I want to, let's pull that out again. So
yeah, though this does point to a difference between Elaine and myself. If Elaine got a box in the mail and opened it up, it might be something from Lululemon, and I, on the other hand, recently I got a box and opened it up, and it was a uniform from Forbidden Planet that I immediately put on and cuddled. And so if one goes to my Facebook page, you can see that wonder of nature.
I want to thank Norporeal Lifeform and War Dogheim for the early super chats. We appreciate that. Thanks for bringing the love to Mark and Elaine. You guys deserve it, and thank you, War Dogheim, for your generosity. People are excited that you're here. We also get so many people watching the replays. LJ, any comment on Forbidden Planet?
Absolutely. I have been digging through all of your work over the last 24 hours and then some. And I really love everything that I've seen so far. So from what I understand, you guys are trying to do more of a Kickstarter right now. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And because Space Command, our fans have given us the money so far that's allowed us to make the first 7 hours of Space Command, and we're going to be making another 7 hours. That'll form the first season, but it's through our fans and through people buying investment shares. And because again, we've both worked extensively for the networks and the studios for pretty much all of them over the last 40 years, but I didn't want them being given the opportunity of messing this up. And we all come from the same fan base of loving good science fiction, and so I want to just be able to, Elaine and I both, we write it, we cast it, we shoot it, we put it out to the fans. It's Mark, very wonderful.
Mark probably mentioned that one of the motivators at that point was that science fiction had become very dark, television had become rather dark, cynical, and we weren't, and we wondered, well, are people? Is there a large? We knew that there was a fan base that agreed with us, but we didn't know how large it was, and that's why Mark said, well, a hopeful vision of the future.
Yeah, for Space Command.
And heroes are actually heroic. A hero never tortures anybody or demeans anybody.
Well, yeah, the hero isn't the meanest guy around. The hero is the most compassionate, the most empathetic.
And when we talked at conventions, we said, hey, what would you like to see more of, and what do you never want to see again? And what people said is they never want to see the comedy relief. They never want to see the butt of the joke, where somebody is demeaned.
That doesn't mean you can have a character who's funny, but yeah, as Elaine says, someone who's demeaned.
Witty,
yes.
But somebody who's demeaned and put down. And we said, well, yeah. So we put out the first Space Command, promotional piece to see if we could get money. And from all over the world, there's this worldwide community of people who wanted hope.
Yes.
Who were willing to fight for hope, and were willing to fight for community, and were willing to fight for an upbeat vision of the world. Mm-hmm. And so as much as nice as it was to get money, it was also wonderful to say there are a lot of people who really care and want to see more in terms of kindness, generosity, real courage, and hope. Mm-hmm. And that was all of the world.
That's fantastic. And so the series, you said it was set about 60 years in the future. It covers about 150 years and 4 different families, right?
Yes, that's correct. And
I'm curious, is it going to be linear? Or are we going to jump around a little bit?
We jump around from generation to generation, so we get to see the ripple effect between generations, because that was of great interest to me. How a small action in one generation can lead to a big reaction happening in another one, and I thought it would be really fun to be able to see our main characters and their children and their children and their children, and just see how things happen as we continue our story.
So we start with one that's just set now, in the future.
Well, the prequel starts 30 years from now, and then the pilot, we did an audio play and graphic novel prequel that we're combining into an animated storyboard. And but the first story starts 60 years from now. So we start 30 years in the prequel, jump to 60 years from now, and then as you said, cover 150 years.
But we reflect back and forth, people learning from each other.
Yes.
And so there becomes a weaving, so we don't lose any of our characters.
Yeah. And there they are.
So we try and do a tapestry, so back and forth. As the further we go, the more we reflect back on different characters and how they influence other characters and how their experiences influence other characters. But the one consistent theme throughout is if you're going to be a hero in Space Command, you're somebody who is fighting for an ethical stance to their community, to the universe.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. Let's do
Sounds
that.
Very good. No, not a lot of shows are doing that. In fact, a lot of the times, and this is just kind of what I've seen, and maybe specifically from pulling from Disney, but heroes don't get to have parents for the most part. You can't be a successful hero if you have 2 nice, loving parents. That just doesn't work. You get one parent at best, and so it's.
Well, I agree with you, and I wanted to see these characters in Matrix, as it were, to meet their families, to meet their friends. It's amazing how often in science fiction people don't even have friends. And I wanted to establish that, and I also wanted it to be inclusive. So, for instance, Mira Furlan, whom we lost recently, sadly, she was one of the main characters. But we have Mira and her daughter speaking Serbo-Croatian to each other, and then English to the other characters. Or we have other characters where we did a scene in the pandemic episode. We did a special bonus 2-hour episode during the pandemic, and we had an entire scene in Spanish where 3 of our characters were just speaking Spanish, and it was one of our crewmen, our Space Command crew members from the Paladin, reaching out to his estranged father, to invite him to the wedding on Mars. And for a long time I'd wanted a scene entirely in Spanish, and we've just cast an actress in Moscow who will be doing her role in both English and Russian. She's
a real sweetie.
She's great. So
it is again drawing in the community, and it's not that people don't have their little kinks and idiosyncrasies and things that you'd rather but it's like everybody. They're people, so they're not like sterling, but they have a basic impulse toward the good, despite everything else.
Do you think you'll ever do a scene in now I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Esperanto?
No.
No, just no.
The reason is because Esperanto, for those who don't know, of course, was a an invented language utilizing a lot of bits and pieces from a number of different languages that really existed. People like Forrest J. Ackerman and that sort of generation of science fiction aficionados were devotees of Esperanto.
It was
and in fact,
very good intent.
yes, and in fact, Leslie Stevens, who produced and created The Outer Limits, after Outer Limits, he did a movie entirely in Esperanto, starring William Shatner, on the theory that everyone that would then flock to it all around the world. And of course, it was a total disaster. But so no, I won't have Esperanto. I don't think we'll have a lot of other things.
We have a lot of, because people have shown a lot of tolerance and, in fact, interest in foreign fare that you can see on television.
Yeah.
And when you watch foreign fare on television, some of which is really outstanding, and you're reading subtitles, sometimes you even forget that you're not watching it in English.
Yes.
When you look back on it. So we found that that's really acceptable, and so to let people see themselves, more and more often, and who they are and who they represented heroically, that also representing them in their own language, I think is worthy. And so we just throw on subtitles.
Well, the lovely thing is that Netflix, one of the great things Netflix has done is it's proven that people will watch TV series in the foreign language. And that's really great. And
I watch a lot of Korean.
Great stuff.
Yeah. And we watch all those Norwegian things where they find a body in the water and try and figure out who murdered her. It's like, those chili police procedurals. But the thing is that I want the fictional future that we create to reflect the world that we actually live in. And I think that Gene Roddenberry was very clever and very powerfully inspired to create an inclusive universe with Star Trek, where you had an African-American actress and an Asian actor and so forth. It's like, it's important. It has an enormous real world effect when you do that with honesty and passion.
And when you express certain values, a million years ago, when I was on one of my many marches for justice, I was marching against the war in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, this was with a crowd of people. It wasn't just you.
Yes, it's large.
Make it sound like you're some kind of and this was in 1993 when the war had been over 20 years, but you just were not going to let it go.
It was a women's strike for peace, and I was dressed really nicely, as we all were, so they wouldn't say it was just hippies.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is we were walking along, and one of the most touching things is we were walking in marching along, where people were saying, "I didn't know anyone agreed with me. I thought I was alone."
Yes.
And so somehow I think certain messages get lost.
Mm-hmm. You do.
And then sometimes we, as people seeking that message, sort of lose ourselves because we feel isolated. And so that's one reason that we feel it's important to put forward messages that it's valuable to value friends. It's valuable to stick to your ethical stance. It's valuable to allow many people's opinions and say there isn't this clear right and wrong.
Yes.
Which is why we love living in a city. It's great to have like at least 5 people disagree with you per day, so you don't become a Stalin's mushroom. And so that's why we really wanted to do Space Command and have as many. As broad a range of people in there, showing that, people care about other people and people will take heroic stands.
Well, we strongly believe in the positive power of love and compassion in the world. And I think that that's the counterweight to the chaos and the evil. And you have to show that. I mean, I'm so amazed. I have a number of friends who are showrunners, and they're wonderful people who have gotten where they've gotten through hard work and by being honorable. They go home to their families, their loving parents, all of that. And yet often in the shows they're creating, they're gravitating toward the worst in humanity. The characters are very, very much on the dark side of things, and very much the message is a very dark and cruel one. And I don't quite understand the disconnect between the lives they've built for themselves and the worlds they're presenting in their art. And again, it's not for me to criticize nor point a finger. It's up to me to take responsibility for the work that I create. But I certainly feel strongly that love has sustained me all these years. And Elaine has, as I said, kept my feet on the ground and kept my head bolted on my shoulders. And I mean, my mom was very compassionate too. And I think that that's what will make the world survive and thrive. And so we take a stand for what we believe in very strongly. But that's Marc, not. Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
No, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, but that doesn't mean that we're not creating something that we find entertaining. I mean, our main objective always is to tell stories that excite us, that thrill us. That it's like making right now, as I've noted before, we're making 2 8-foot-tall aliens. We've just been building an alien spaceship interior. I mean, that's super cool.
We don't want anything to look like it's written on a broadsheet, advertising.
No, so we're not proselytizing. We're dramatists, and we're telling a story, but we are conveying a certain worldview through that story.
But in the third piece, which is the Great Solar War, war is not acceptable. I mean, there's a war that's starting, and the stance is, wait a minute, once you start a war, and once you start shooting up civilians, and once you start going,
the war is the enemy, not the other side.
Right.
That's the notion.
So the notion is that the hero isn't there to engage in a war. The hero is there to try and find a way to
avert.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, you have to recognize that violence is the problem. Violence is never the solution, and that's,
and nobody walks away okay.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing these 8-foot-tall creatures. I think you refer to them as the harvesters.
No, the harvesters are a different species.
They're a different species.
Yeah, this is an alien. We actually had a contest to name this creature, and so we actually had 2 winners. The official name of the creatures are the Pisara, which is a historical to an island of. There's a whole story behind that, but there's also a teenage girl who won the second prize with Spiny Cat Monkey. So that was pretty cool. But
now these creatures kind of seep in through the ground, right, and then come up and like kind of take you over and just run you until there's no energy left in your battery.
Well, those are the harvesters.
Those are the harvesters. Okay.
I'll bring back one of the.
Yeah. So
please do. I felt like walking on stilts for a week after I heard this, by the way, because it just creeped me out. I was like, oh, that's good.
Yes.
What we wanted to do was create a creature that initially we thought was extremely scary because it was being controlled by the harvester.
Yeah.
And so it was supposed to look scary and ugly and alien. And then we find out the opposite.
Oh,
that was the.
Let's see if I can
Let
get
me see that.
This is
that's amazing.
the concept head for the Pisara. So
Wow.
they'll be 8 foot tall. It's gone somewhat beyond this design, but this is
Great work.
what we get to keep at home.
So we wanted something that was formidable and scary, and we turn that.
How fun. Oh, that sounds so fun.
Yeah.
That sounds like an oh boy. It's like, oh boy.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you guys, because a lot of people have been asking Orville production, for example, will they address the pandemic in season 3, and will Space Command at any point address something similar to the pandemic?
It's very, very interesting, because when the pandemic first hit, we all of our actor friends who are normally extremely busy on the shows that they're shooting, we're all stuck at home and going crazy from boredom. And Elaine and I said, well, let's create a special episode. Initially, it was just going to be a 10-minute vignette. Then it grew to 20 minutes. Then it grew to an hour. Then it grew to 2 hours. And we had our actors shooting the scenes in their own homes. And it was basically revisiting characters that we had set up in the early episodes, and then introducing characters that we know we would see later in the season. And that was, as I mentioned before, Christina Moses, Armin Shimmerman, and Barbara Bain. And all of our actors signed on. Doug Jones, Robert Picardo, even Mira Furlan. I think it was the last thing she ever shot. And so it addressed the pandemic in a very interesting way by saying we can stay creative within the pandemic. We can find ways to reach out to each other. We can find ways to do our art and our work.
But in terms of addressing the pandemic, in terms of the actual material and storytelling, that's what the harvesters are about, in that they become they're like a germ, and they start to invade more and more and more people. And it's like, do we join together to fight it, or do we go down?
Yes,
crossing races, crossing planets, crossing space. So there's like the one thing that is like
that unites everybody
species, because
they
are like the epidemic.
Well, they're a parasite. Yeah,
they're a parasite.
And so to that degree, but I wouldn't do something directly about the pandemic. I mean, you always have to filter it through your aesthetic and your art. If you're just saying, well, I'm going to do something about the issue of the moment, without finding some way to make it more universal. See, that's where the Twilight Zone is such a great show, because Rod Serling was a mainstream dramatist, and because of censorship, he had to start writing fantasy and science fiction and horror, and it made him more universal. So that if you look at his something from like his Playhouse 90s from the 50s, like Requiem for a Heavyweight or Patterns or any of that stuff, it's entertaining, but it's not, you know, the great work that he did on Twilight Zone. I mean, no one's going to be watching those episodes over and over and over again, because they're sort of like, once you watch them, you pretty much got it. Whereas if you watch, you know, The Howling Man or Eye of the Beholder or any of these great episodes he wrote for the Twilight Zone, you can watch those over and over again. I mean, how many, you know, I mean, Burgess Meredith is the last man on earth. Who doesn't want to see that, you know, if, you know, fairly often, you know, so.
But to be honest, when we're stuck at home, we were watching all those pandemic movies, those old pandemic movies.
Contagion. Yeah, we just saw it.
Contagion,
but Contagion really is the one, because it's like,
even World War Z, you know.
World War Z, absolutely. And there's a Japanese one called Virus that we were checking out. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're typical.
Yeah, we get goofy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, but we keep working. I mean, the funny thing is that we'll usually watch TV in the evening, maybe like from 7 to 9 or something. But every, you know, during the day, particularly Monday through Friday, we just hit the ground running. I mean, we're dealing with our visual effects team, our editor, our, you know, on and on. I mean, writing scripts. We're always juggling multiple projects. I just finished a new book. There it is. It's called Greenlighting.
And look at it. It's even in paper form. You can touch it and everything.
There it is. Look at that.
When is the public getting that?
As soon as I send it to my publisher, it's.
Is that Greenlight Yourself? Is that the book Greenlight? I want that.
Me
too. I was like, that needs to be in my repertoire.
Yes. Well, Greenlighting. It's called Greenlighting Yourself, and it's going to be published by Silman James. And I wanted to really address things that normally aren't in books about how you make it in Hollywood. So I talk about working with stupid people. I talk about, you know, like how you can deal with stupid people, which is mainly avoid them if you can. But if you have to work with, like, sometimes there'll be an executive above you who's really an idiot, and you can't.
But not usually, but it happens.
But it does happen, and so it's about how you can cope with that, how you can find ways around them, or how you can find ways to deal with them without wrecking your work. You know, all sorts of stuff.
Well,
and
what started us as mentors in the first place, or having, you know, helping our fellows, was that there were a number of artists of every stripe who were really, really talented that we'd meet, who would, I'm not making it. They pack up and go back to their home state.
Yes.
When they were extremely talented, they just didn't understand how the machinery worked.
Yes.
And so it was about the machinery. It wasn't about them. And we said, well, what a terrible waste, when it's just about the machinery and them taking stuff personally. That's just a very broken conduit.
Well, we represent the Hollywood of mutual support and kindness and inclusivity. And that's why we started our roundtable 28 years ago. And now it's thousands of members, and it's continued even through the pandemic via Zoom and email. And because, again, if there's one thing that Elaine and I it's consistent and, you know, and congruent in our work and in our life and in what we do for other people. I mean, again, also, see, this is why I love science fiction, because science fiction, you can go to a convention. I mean, it's been like this since 1939, since the first World Science Fiction Convention. You can go to conventions, you can meet your heroes, and they'll just sit down and talk with you. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I noticed that all my favorite TV shows and books were being written by the same people. It was Harlan Ellison and Ted Sturgeon and Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont and George Clayton Johnson and so forth, D.C. Fontana. And I could go to conventions when I was 15 or 16 and meet them, and they became friends and mentors. And so I feel very strongly not just the obligation, but the great opportunity and the great pleasure of paying it forward. And so, yeah.
And I noticed that. Sorry. I just
finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Elaine.
Just noticed the question about the Twilight Zone 80s series. Did you mention Walking Distance as one of your favorites?
Well, that's the original show. They're talking about the one that I wrote for. Yeah. But PJ, were you gonna just say there was?
You can answer Piano Dean's question first, sure. If you want. A couple of your highest episode recommendations for Twilight 80s.
Yeah, I wrote for that show. I wrote a script called Knife Through the Veil, and it was a week before we started prep, and the censors pulled the plug thinking it was too hard-edged, and now it would be nothing. It would be nothing. But Katie Sackhoff wanted to do it more recently, and eventually we'll get around to shooting it. I'm doing a new series called Rod Serling's After Twilight that we're in the negotiation stage about, and so we'll probably shoot that script on that show.
Do you mind if I ask you, Mark? I'm just curious if you know one of my favorite, because I was trying to think of all the really memorable Twilight Zones, and I know that you've written so many, but I'm curious, do you remember The Midnight Sun?
Of course, Lois Nettleton.
Love that one. That one always got me. It was like, And I know it's it's now an overused thing to do the dream sequence,
No.
but it was just so cool, and it always stuck in my head. So for those that may not be familiar, but you follow this woman, and she's just suffering because the world is about to come to an end, basically.
Yes.
And the sun is, from what I understand, it might be going into a red giant. I don't quite remember, but basically the world is getting way too hot to be habitable.
Yes.
And they're going through all the turmoil of that, and then, spoiler alert, at the very end, she kind of wakes up and you find out it's actually the complete opposite. It's actually freezing outside. And, she's like, it's been so hot. And you see, I think what is her mother figure kind of looking outside, and she's looking at the blizzard. And it was just, I loved that twist.
Yeah. And the idea is that Earth is freeze, that everyone's going to die from the freezing, whereas previously it was going to be everyone was going to die from the increasing heat. And, and I interviewed the director of that episode, Anton Linder,
cool.
and he told me that because she's a painter in the episode, and at one point the sun, when she's kind of passing out, the sun is melting the painting, and you see the paints running. And the way they did that was they put it on a hot plate and melted this. They did the painting in wax and then put it on a hot plate and heated it up, and that caused the colors to run. So but yeah, absolutely. And then, but the question that they were asking on the little thing below was about the 80s show, and that's when they brought the show back. The original Twilight Zone ran from 1959 to 1964, and it was brought back in the 80s after Serling's death, and it had an amazing writing staff: Harlan Ellison, Rockne O'Bannon, George R.R. Martin, on and on. I mean, it was Alan Brennert. And so they had some very good episodes. Her Pilgrim Soul was one that Alan Brennert wrote. Paladin of the Lost Hour was Harlan's contribution. There were a number of good episodes, but it was much more hit and miss than the original Twilight Zone, which had a lot greater consistency because of Serling running it. And
Mark, forgive me. I think there's some people in the chat who want me to ask this question.
Sure.
Do you think George R.R. Martin will finish what he's working on?
I think he is in such an uncomfortable position. I mean, they totally.
I think people have been unfair to him, in my opinion.
Yes. I mean, I just, first of all, I think Game of Thrones was an amazing show up until it blew the ending, as everyone tends to think. If you want to see how I would have ended it, on my YouTube channel, Mr. Sci-Fi, I actually did a half-hour conversation about how you would actually end it properly and satisfyingly, but they just screwed it up. So he's in a difficult position, because now it's sort of like, okay, so he has to write his version of what the ending would have been, and maybe it'll be better. Let's hope so. But I can understand how he would wake up every day and not want to do that. It just seems like such a drag when there's so many other things he could write. See, before he was George R.R. Martin in caps, he could write whatever the hell he wanted to write. Interestingly enough, when Game of Thrones, when the first book came out, it was a flop. But he had $1 million 3-book deal, and so they weren't going to remainder the first book. And it was in that period when the first 3 books were coming out that they sold Game of Thrones to HBO. And and basically the pitch on that was The Sopranos meets Lord of the Rings, and it sold on that pitch. So he was very, very lucky that happened, but it also, in a way, it's almost like a gilded cage, because he's, he can buy bowling alleys and cinemas and stuff or whatever he cares to buy now, but he has to definitely finish those books if he's got the bandwidth to do so. And,
let me just say, Mark, before, when you were talking about greenlighting yourself and working with difficult people, I do think it's very important, the fact that you really have put emotional intelligence into your book. I think that's really, it's key. I think it's key.
Yeah, and again, and one thing I did was I had one chapter on building from success and one chapter on recovering from failure, and then after that I had the chapter on having a life. And I said the reason I put it in this order is because having a life is vital, whether you're failing or succeeding. It isn't dependent on those things. You must have a separate life. You must have people who love you. You must have pursuits, things that bring you joy, that are not just around whether or not your career is working. And so I think that was, and I think it's very good that, I have Elaine and we have a life, and so I'm not just some embittered soul, sitting, in the darkness trying to type on some old typewriter, just cursing the fates, which is what I would be if I hadn't met her, so I'd just be this sad.
I think it's amazing that you guys are creating together, and I would love to eventually find out. So you named the ship the Paladin, which I'm actually more familiar with in Dungeons and Dragons terms. The Paladin is a holy knight.
Yes.
So I'm curious, was that the inspiration?
No, it was very interesting. Originally, my friend Doug Drexler was part of this project, and he was a brilliant VFX artist on the various Star Treks and on Battlestar Galactica. And he was a big fan of a show called Have Gun Will Travel. And the name of the main character on that show was Paladin. And so he suggested we name the ship Paladin. And I thought it was fun because, again, it had this double meaning of the Western from the TV show, but also the Paladin is also a figure in chess as well. And in medieval, So then when we cast Sarah Marafino as Captain Essex, we came up with a sister ship, the Templar. And so it was very fun to kind of have those two ships. And but that's how the genesis of those names.
Thank you. I was curious about that. It's always fun to see where creators come up with the names.
Yes.
Tyrone, I want to thank Tyrone for the super chat. Obviously, this is a little bit of sarcasm with regards to Finn and the Disney posters, Star Wars Disney posters. Thank you for the support, Tyrone. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, but speaking about racial issues, I mean, I very much, we've worked very hard to have, African American actors and actresses and Asian and Latina, actors and actresses, because so many of my friends who are Black or Asian or Latino, particularly Latino and Black, they're so frustrated at the roles they have to go out for, these gang members, these criminals, these, just so limited and stupid and not reflecting the lives that they actually live. And so I'm very proud. This is something great about science fiction, where you can cast people, and they don't have to play the stereotypical roles. They can play people, and they can have, nurturing lives and be fully rounded individuals. Bob Picardo's character plays a Muslim. In Space Command, the character's name is Yusuf Sikander, and I have a friend whose name is Yusuf Sikander, and he's from Afghanistan. And the whole point was that Bob is, he's a foreman working in a mining operation on Ceres, overseeing synthetic human workers, and he's a widower, and he's trying to raise his son, and he's a fully rounded human being. And the fact that he's a Muslim is incidental, just like, Elaine and I are Jewish, we have friends who are Catholic, whatever. It's an aspect of our nature, but it's not the defining, label. And so it was very fun because Bob Picardo, took on the role, and we actually had my friend Yusuf Sikander come on set to show him how to pray and on the prayer rug and all of those things to kind of guide him so it'd be correct. And then
he, Bob, who is a Catholic, had to ask his
priest if it was okay to play Muslim,
to pray, correctly.
If that was okay,
he's acting.
The priest said go for it. So and by the way, Bob also plays a very convincing Jew. If you've seen him on Hail Caesar, he plays a rabbi, and he's very, very funny.
Extremely funny.
Yeah, very funny. He's great. He's terrific. We've written a new role for him in the new show, also Sweet Haven. Originally, he was going to be married in that show to Mira Furlan, but when we lost Mira, we've recast the role with Marta Kristen from the original Lost in Space. She played Judy on the original Lost in Space, and she's terrific. So,
wow. Mark, there was a question that was left over from the other day about. Let me just frame the question real quick. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked Walter Matthau one time, "Don't you have to train if you're going to play a doctor?" And he said, "No, I don't have to train. People don't expect me to become a doctor. They're expecting to see Walter Matthau playing a doctor, pretending to be a doctor." And so my question here is, when you were writing for Real Ghostbusters, are you writing for Venkman and Egon, or are you writing for Bill Murray and Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd when you're thinking there?
I'm writing for the character. So when I was writing the Real Ghostbusters, I don't think they had animated the show yet. When we were brought in as writers, they sent us a videotape of the movie. It hadn't been released on home video yet, and so those were the templates in my mind. So those characters were sort of melded to the actors who played them. But I don't think, like, for instance, when I write Spock or whatever, I'm thinking of the characters. It was very interesting when I did the George Takei Sulu episode for Star Trek New Voyages. George and I had extensive conversations about the character of Sulu, and we both agreed that while George Takei was gay, Sulu was not. And it wasn't any judgment whether straight or gay, no ranking in terms of which was better. It was simply the notion of who the characters are, and because you don't want, they're playing characters, that's why they're called actors, and so but Mira's character in Space Command was gay, and so I talked to her about whether she felt comfortable playing a gay character, and she was fine with it, of course.
But you're still careful about detail, like body language and the way the details. We always had military personnel.
Yes, that was something. Yes, absolutely.
On set to make sure that our actors were handling the guns and following appropriate protocol. Yes. So you want to make sure that you're not insulting.
Yes, and the military person. Yeah. Oh, let's try to finish the thought.
No, that's not.
No, but I was just going to say the military personnel. The military personnel were on hand so that if the actors got out of line, they could shoot them. So that was another.
No, but they were extremely helpful because there were there's so many details that.
But these were
screwing up.
But these were people from the real Space Command.
Yeah.
These were people from Vandenberg, and we've talked to NASA scientists and doctors working with the ISS and all sorts. I mean, medical doctors who are the medical doctors for the astronauts when they're up in space.
So if we write a cop, we run it by a cop, and they say this is yes, this is no. This isn't quite yes, but you can compromise there.
Well, but even more than that. I mean, like, for instance, when I was writing a spec homicide script, I rode for several days with the homicide detectives, and I would get dressed in suit and tie, and they took me to a double homicide, and it was really interesting because there was the news crew and the crowd and the yellow tape, and I just stepped over the yellow tape, walked up to the bodies, and the uniform cops thought I was a detective, so they said, "What do you want done with the crime scene?" And I said, "Well, ask Sal." I pointed at the real guy, but I should have probably said, "Well, bag those guys." Or whatever. It was a sense of power, definitely.
No, research. As
you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're talking about.
I have a piece set in Arkansas, and so I drove through Arkansas. I went to all those places. I talked to those people.
Well, we interviewed a retired gangster. Yeah,
a retired gangster. It's like everybody in that I had spoken to. So it's not that I was taking them specifically, but like the language and the belief system and the way of looking at the world. Yeah, it's different when you actually sees reality, even though it wasn't a reality.
We like to go where the places and people we're writing about. Yeah, absolutely.
There is a writer's joke that I want to get a t-shirt made out of, but it says, please ignore my browser history. I'm not a serial killer, I'm a writer.
Yes, yes, and that is a danger.
But I think it's fantastic that you took such a more hands-on approach to it. I think so many of us now are just like, okay, I'm going to research it, and I have like 16 tabs pulled up on different things just reading about it. But the fact that you guys actually drove through Arkansas, that's very cool.
But here's my reasoning on that. When you're researching something just via books or via the web, your experience of whatever that is filtered through the person who's presenting it to you. Whereas if you go there yourself, it's direct experience. And so, for instance, when
I can't go to the moon on Titan.
Not yet. Not yet.
I love it. I love the positivity.
Yes. But on the other hand, the great part about being a writer, the reason we love it is that you never know what's going to come your way, what you're going to be doing. And for instance, I started going to England a lot to meet with executives there, pitching Space Command, and it ultimately led to a project that we were brought aboard as producers, and Elaine was the writer, about the life of Lord Peter Hayne, who's in the House of Lords in England, but his entire family, when he was young, were anti-apartheid activists in South Africa. And so we went to South Africa, and we were interviewing people who were in the anti-apartheid movement and
taught, firebrands.
Amazing people,
tough people.
Amazing people. And so we were in Johannesburg and Cape Town and so forth. And then we went to the UK and interviewed people there. And then Elaine wrote the first 2 hours of the 4-hour miniseries. But, or the pilot of hers that just got shot deals with the mafia, because our DP, it turns out, grew up on Sicily with the mafia. And he has become a director producer on that project. He brought Elaine in to write it. And so now here she is writing about a Black female investigative journalist who uncovers this whole mafia thing that goes from America to Sicily. And, so Elaine's, I remember she was getting a note from our friend who's the producer director, and she was going, I was only hearing her side of it, and she was going, So the uncle's chopped up in the freezer. Okay, I got it. and then off she goes to type, So I love that aspect of it, and
But the reason I'm writing that is it wasn't about the violence; it was getting inside the heads of people,
yes,
and how they feel.
Well,
even when they do really bad things, of how they still preserve their self-image as being good people.
Yes, and when you say getting inside the heads of people, that's the heads that are attached to the shoulders, and also no longer attached to the shoulders. So absolutely. But again, it's just the surprise. But you still have to make it live emotionally for you, and you have to make sure it follows your own emotional beliefs and ethical beliefs. For instance, when I was hired as a story editor on Friday the 13th, the series, if it had been just based on the movies, I wouldn't have done it. But it was about these two cousins who inherit an antique shop from their dead uncle, and they find he made a deal with the devil, and there's all these cursed objects out there creating harm, and their job is to get these things back under lock and key to keep people safe. And I said, our villains in the show can be perverse, but we must not be. And so that was, again, that for any individual writer, where they place that bar of ethical responsibility varies, and some don't have that bar anywhere. But for myself, given the people who are my mentors, Ted Sturgeon and Ray Bradbury and Harlan and so forth, it's so important.
When there were murders, it wasn't disposable people. They weren't like prostitutes. Oh well, it doesn't matter.
No.
You didn't. They weren't or homeless people.
Right.
It wasn't. No life was taken as inconsequential.
Yes, gratuitously. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Marc, can you tell us again, or either of you, tell us again about the casting process? You had an open casting call for the lead roles. That was very unique as well for Space Command.
Yeah. Well, I knew that that we were going to be casting a number of name actors I'd worked with before. Doug Jones, Bob Picardo, Mira Furlan, Bill Mumy, Bruce Boxleitner. I knew that we were going to have enough name talent to make it, a holiday for science fiction fans, like a great present, a wrapped gift. So I remember the worldwide talent search they had for Scarlett O'Hara for Gone with the Wind. And I thought, boy, it'd be fun, because a lot of the Kickstarter campaigns would offer like a walk-on, so you might be able to be on screen or maybe given one line like, oh my God, they shot that man or whatever. But I thought, nobody is offering lead roles to an open call, a worldwide casting call for the leads. And so we had two roles that we decided we would do this with. One was Captain Kemmer, and the other was Cadet Bradbury. And Captain Kemmer was a male role, and Cadet Bradbury could be male or female. And we got 7,000 inquiries. We got 1,200 audition tapes, and then we narrowed it down to about 40 people, and then we had callbacks in person. And the fun part was that although Captain Cameron was a male role, one actress auditioned for that role, and that was Sarah Marafino, who you see on the screen. And I was so impressed with her willingness to color outside the lines that I called her in, and I really liked her, and so that I created the role of Captain Essex and the sister ship, the Templar, specifically for her, and she was terrific. And we cast Ethan McDowell and Aaron Gaffey,
wonderful actors all across the country.
So
like a lot of them, we couldn't cast in those roles, but we held on
created
to
other roles
because they were just extremely talented.
We ended up casting about nine actors out of those casting calls, and then subsequently we've had casting calls, worldwide talent searches for other roles in Space Command, and it just continues because again,
and we're offering. There are some roles offered through
the Kickstarter campaign as well, but that's not exclusively how we do things.
No, that isn't.
Yeah.
But whenever anybody ends up on the show, we tend to talk to them,
right,
and watch their skills. And the part is written specifically.
Yeah.
Even if it's a very small part, it's written specifically
for that person. Yes. And you were asking earlier about how I come up with the names for characters. Or names for things, but in characters are things too. The actors' opinions to the contrary, and I'm joking. But with the Space Command personnel, they're all named after classic science fiction writers. So there's Bradbury, Sturgeon, Asimov, on and on. I mean, Lee Brackett is the ship's doctor. These are all science fiction writers from the 50s, and then when we cast the actress in Moscow, I was thinking of a name for her, and so she'll be playing Tatiana Strugatsky, after the Strugatsky brothers, who wrote Roadside Picnic and other science fiction novels.
What a fantastic way to play homage. Just to all of the influences that you had over the years. You're just like, It's my creation, and I'm going to put everyone I ever loved as a sci-fi writer or other in it, and I love it.
Yes, well, it was very funny because I had one character named Lieutenant Murray Leinster after the writer of that name, and then we cast Victor Manso from Venezuela, and it's like, oh no, he's not a Murray Leinster. So it was like, okay. So then I had to come up with a Latino name, a Hispanic name for a science fiction writer, and that was an interesting challenge. And so he ultimately named him Jorge Luis Borges after the famous fantasist of that name. And so he's Lieutenant Jorge Borges, and that's been great fun. So so just going. And when we cast Nichelle Nichols in Space Command, her character name is Octavia Butler, as a little homage to my friend Octavia Butler, who we lost far too soon. But it, again, it's just. And my hope for that, people often say, well, why are you stealing these people's names? It's like, no, it's the reason is because a lot of fans of science fiction movies and TV shows don't know the writers of the books. And my thought is, if someone is a fan of Space Command, they say Sturgeon, that's a funny name. Was there a science fiction writer named Sturgeon? That might lead them to the wonderful writing of Theodore Sturgeon or Harlan Ellison or Asimov.
I think people will see that it's a fantastic way to discover things you didn't even know were out there.
Yes. And because again, I feel that that there's this wonderful treasure trove of great science fiction written, from the 30s through the 50s that a lot of people don't know about at all. So, and even Ray Bradbury, there are people who haven't heard of Ray, and that's astonishing to me because he was such a genius.
Mark, Gap Stargate asks, is there a lack of male? There's lesbian relationships, but is there a lack of gay relationships on sci-fi?
Well, I think there's a lack of a number of different kinds of roles in science fiction. I think the reason I created lesbian roles in Space Command was because when Sally Ride died, they mentioned her longtime companion, and it was the first time anyone knew, overtly that she was gay. And I thought, why aren't they teaching in every history class in the nation that there was a lesbian astronaut? The first female in space was a lesbian, because unless you tell people such things, they believe that there aren't any lesbians in the space program. There aren't any lesbian scientists or you have to let people know. And I don't mean to out people. I don't think that's appropriate if they choose to not be outed. But I think the more people see a wide variety of kinds of people in the world and in their heroes, they understand how the world really is, rather than some narrow racist, homophobic, xenophobic,
But but answer the question, I think you see, it's like lesbians are often treated horribly too. But I think the reason you see less male relationships is that I think they're more threatening to the
male audience. To
the male writers.
Perhaps.
And whereas with women, they can still say, "Oh, it's kind of sexy," that you're sleeping with a girl. But there's something. I think
we have to cast more.
That's a very good psychoanalysis there, right there, Elaine.
Yeah, but that said, I'm seeing more gay male relationships. Shadow and Bone, I thought, just did a really good. They have a character who's sort of a gunslinger, and he's gay.
I saw that. It was good.
Yeah, and he's a very charming character. Yeah, good character. And
Elaine, can I ask Elaine? Elaine, I don't know if you've watched the Orville, but we were discussing with Mark the other day how in the Orville there's a race that's overtly touching upon this issue with they're all male, and Seth framed it in a very intelligent way, and I think he got around what you're talking about. But I don't know if you've seen it. If you wanted to comment on it.
I saw a little bit because he was watching it. But yes, I mean, I really approve of that because. One of the things that grounds us is how we connect to storytelling. I mean, storytelling started before language, we sat around fires, and it helps define us and who we are. And if we don't see ourselves, we feel, or as growing up as a lonely child, the way a lot of writers did, you feel irrelevant. You feel disconnected from the populace. And it's often literature that connects you back to the human race, because we're not very good at talking to each other. We're not, in our culture, we're not very good at sharing. We're not very good at, nurturing. I wrote a screenplay called Comfort, which just had to do with because I worked on a hotline, and because people just don't know how to ask for comfort or how to give comfort or how to accept it once it's given. But something that helped me stay grounded was reading. And I would be reading and I said, oh, well, wait a minute. I thought nobody felt what I felt or thought what I thought. So it must be a a misperception, because here are these books that are not only loved internationally, but have been for decades.
Yes.
And so I came to realize that there was a breakdown in communication. But what do you do if you never see yourself at all in literature or in drama? I think it's extremely important, because if you're not seeing, it's worse than being condemned. It's like you're invisible. You don't belong to the human race. Yeah. And so I think it's profoundly not just dishonest, but brutal and cruel, because you're basically saying you are nothing. You are not connected to who we are. And I think it's quite bad. Quite bad.
Yeah. And
Elaine,
on the other side, I mean, it's such a good point how awful it is to not feel connected, which means when you do find a book or a television show that is representing, gay relationships or interracial relationships or different points of view, and you can connect to that, it's like a fresh glass of water given to you in the desert. You're like, oh my goodness, finally, thank you so much. Please show me where I can just drink a gallon of this.
Yes.
And so it's fantastic that you're perpetuating that you're continuing to push to put it out there, because it is absolutely important that we keep showing people out there that there is a community that you can be a part of. And I love the comfort. I would love to know more about that. Just look it up because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. And but also speaking to what Elaine's talking about, that's when the original Star Trek aired. The reason I think that Mr. Spock was so appealing to so many science fiction fans was because he was a guy who was very intelligent and had a lot of trouble expressing his emotions. And a lot of science fiction fans were like that. They were the smartest kid in the room, but feeling very much like outcasts, feeling very emotional, but trying to keep a lid on it. I mean, and having difficulty fitting in. And so for every outcast and every intelligent outcast, I think Mr. Spock really resonated. And, so as opposed to Kirk, who was, a different woman each week on a different planet, or whatever, it's Kirk. I don't think a lot of those fans of Star Trek were identifying with Kirk so much as with Spock.
When we talk to artists, actors and writers, and they say, what's your most important job? And we say, and they say, well, to do this, to do that. I say, no, your most important job as an artist is to tell the truth.
Yes.
To tell your truth.
Yes.
And if you say, when such a vast percentage of the world population is gay, to say that doesn't exist, well, that's a pretty big lie.
Right.
And that means your cultural fear and distortion has made you into a liar.
Yes.
And that, again, is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because that's betraying your core responsibility, which is to speak the truth.
Yeah. Though I just thought of what I should say when next time someone asks me if there are any gay characters in Space Command, I should say, oh yeah, all of them. Why not?
Can I ask before I get away from this question, Elaine, I just wanted to ask you on some of the projects that you're working on now. Can you tell us anything about Ashes or Voiceless Roar?
Oh, sure.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
great.
Yeah.
Ashes
Great.
was I was always interested in the way people show courage. And and I was part of the civil rights things, and the person that I held on high was Martin Luther King. And but then there are many people who are heroic in physical situations, and so not that he wasn't heroic in physical situations. He knew at any moment when he was marching that a bullet would come soaring out of that, and it would be the end. He was terrified, but he just kept going. Just kept going anyway.
Yes.
And so the two types of courage, the physical courage and the nothing will stop me courage, I found very interesting. And so I thought, what would it be like with those two different people? Someone who never stopped and someone who was very heroic in physical challenges, but in terms of the long haul would start to go crazy. If they weren't able to be in action, they would start to go crazy. They didn't know how to just stick it out. So what I wrote was a thing called Ashes, which was set in a future where, as we're going now, where there's ecological disaster. And the company had these little fake, experiments to try and set up planets where people could go, where they could terraform them into something livable, but they didn't put in enough money or personnel. And so there were three-person teams in all of the few planets that they found that were livable, but they had to be terraformed. And there was one that was still going. And in this was someone who was very heroic physically, very daring do, and his wife, and someone else who was one of these guys who could not and would not stop. And so it's really about when things go terribly awry, and it's these two men where one wants to get out of there, and the other fellow, no matter how badly awry it's gone, he can't give up because it's the last planet that has possibility for humanity. And so, and one of them wants to just leave because he's going crazy, because he didn't think it'd be just pushing buttons. He thought it'd be like this heroic stuff, but then it wasn't. And the thing is that as it's an ecological disaster, the man who is very physically heroic wants to pull the plug. He just wants to get out, or even if it's killing themselves, he wants to get out. And the other fellow cannot give up. And unfortunately, the heroic one, the physically heroic one, he wants to leave, even if it's suicide, but he can't leave the other guy because that's not within his ethical stance. And so he starts to plead with the one who cannot yield. He said, "Why can't you just yield?" And he said, I don't know if I can't let go. If everything was burned to the ground, I would be the guy still crawling through the ashes, trying to find that little piece of hope. I cannot give up. And so it was about those two kinds of courage and those two ways of seeing the world.
Great.
Wow. Now, is that can we expect to see?
Well,
what time is it?
The screenplay is finished. Right now, I'm shopping it around, so I'm trying to find I've got a team.
Yes,
but I'm just searching out the money because it's just a few characters. It's very few characters. These visual effects are kind of when everything goes to hell, it's a little bit expensive.
Well,
but it's just a total of very few characters, and I hope as soon as if I can find a place, some money, I'll shoot the sucker.
But that said, we have our own physical studio now, a physical studio with spaceship sets in it. And I've been acquiring sets from other movies and TV shows as well, from Cloverfield Paradox and Jonathan Frakes' Thunderbird movie, and on and on. The spacesuit behind me is from Outland. And so we're building a studio that we can shoot a number of different kinds of films and TV shows in. And that's the purpose of it. And we're building an in-house VFX team as well. We're currently talking with my friend Mitch Susskind, who won 3 Emmys for Star Trek, Voyager, Enterprise, and Lost. He also worked on Star Trek Discovery as a visual effects supervisor. So again, we're building a unit, a machine to make entertainment. And one of the plans I think I mentioned last time I was here was that I'm thinking of doing a Kickstarter campaign soon where I'll do, when I produced the Twilight Zone Blu-rays, I did 52 commentaries. There's 104 I haven't done yet. And so I'm thinking of doing a campaign where I'll do the remaining 104 episode commentaries on the original Twilight Zone. And I'm planning to put that money toward one of Elaine's features so she can make Ashes or Voiceless Roar or any of the other ones. And so, because money is really what makes the world go round. And I'm so glad that glad that Kickstarter exists and all these other crowdfunding platforms exist, because my goal is for writers to have the same authorial voice as novelists, for TV writers to do that, because for far too long, like, for instance, a novelist, when they've got a fan base, they can write novel after novel after novel. They can basically write whatever the hell they want, and their fan base will follow them, and that they create a body of work, a consistent and interesting body of work, whether that's Mark Twain or Robert Heinlein or whomever. And television writers are forever constrained from doing that because the networks and studios prior to this have dictated what's allowed to be made. And so many of the best series that they would have made were never made. And so I want to take that away from the studios and the networks. I want to take that power away from them so that we as writers and our fans get to decide what gets made. And so that's what I've been pursuing with Space Command, and now with the Showrunners Network, where we're creating 6 new shows with Rockne O'Bannon and Mark Ferguson and so forth.
But PJ, thanks for asking. The one of the things that I'm really trying to find the money for now, which is Voiceless Roar. When we were traveling around the country, gathering stories, we we drove all the blue highways with our little tiny tape recorder, just talking to people. The thing that was the most wrenching was the dying of the American dream, where it was all about the rich people. Like our economy is doing well because the rich people are doing well. Not that the average Joe is doing particularly well, or hasn't, or their economy hasn't diminished terribly. And so, especially in the small towns, for those of you who aren't familiar with small towns, when an industry leaves a small town, as many are, to break unions and to move to like China, where people are so radically underpaid, or Mexico, where people are radically underpaid, and so the town becomes a blowaway. And there's a thing called a walkaway, where you've spent your life building equity in a home, but there's no
But you
work,
can't afford to keep paying for it.
And nobody will even, you own your own home, and there's nobody to buy it because there's no industry in the town. And so it's a walkaway. It's where you lock up your house.
Sounds a little bit like Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, almost.
Yes,
exactly. It is like that.
Yes,
and so but
there's no grapes in it. Yeah.
So Voiceless Roar is set in a small Midwestern town.
Yes.
With like a lot of small Midwestern town. And the reason I say Voiceless Roar is that we have trouble expressing who we are, and we certainly don't hear from the average Joe, from the little guys. And so, especially in the West, people tend to be, oh, I don't want to talk about my troubles. I'm going to keep it to myself. Child abuse or violence. We just keep alcohol. We're going to keep it to ourselves. It's not polite. And so the Midwest is especially hard hit by the silence. And then there was Main Street versus Wall Street.
Yeah.
And so just talking to people across the country, what I found out was a lot of these small towns were blowing away and were being corporatized.
Yeah.
And so all these wonderful little shops and all of this wonderful life was blowing away, and it was being corporatized, and big corporations would come in, and then people would be getting for staggering amounts of work, they'd be getting below livable wages. And so, but some towns were fighting back. And so in the Voiceless Roar, it's about a group of people who, as this town is starting to fail, and this group of people wants to rebuild the town the way certain small towns have rebuilt themselves, by fighting to bring in tourists, by energizing their own skills and their own crafts, and bringing it back to the way it was, rather than simply being corporatized. Whereas we have a mayor who is the unintentional villain of the piece, who wants to bring in corporate money and save the town through corporate money. And he doesn't mean to be bad, but
it'll destroy the town.
But it will destroy the town, because he sees himself, he's fighting for his own ego, and he's seeing himself as the good dad. And these people really don't know what to do for themselves. And so in trying to fight for this little piece of ego and being the good dad, and trying to quote unquote save the town in his own view, with himself as the head of it, he's destroying the town. And it's about how people start to fight back.
What's the format for this project then, Elaine? Is it a film?
It's a movie.
It's a film, which could be either streaming or in theaters. But it's shot as a film.
Or cranial implant.
A cranial implant. Yeah. Anyway, yes. So that's.
I mean, just saying.
It could go on, but we visit all these different families, and it's how, as they start to become politically involved, how they get more involved in their own life and start speaking truths that they didn't have the courage to speak earlier, just about their own life.
And I think it's pretty clear from this conversation that Elaine lives in reality, and I just visited occasionally. But I think we're a good match.
Mark and Elaine, Mountains of Elysium asks, how much bigger do you want to take Space Command? If you could put the theater, the theater of the Mind Straight onto the screen.
Yeah.
Do you want to go there?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I have huge ambitions, but I don't. The way I do it is I just sort of write what I want to see, and so the first 2 hours of Space Command has nearly 2,000 visual effects shots, which is gigantic. The first hour has 900, and the second hour has 900.
Well, more than gigantic. We found out it was silly,
insane. But yes. But the point is, I'm not. So it's not a matter of, oh gosh, it's just two people talking for 2 hours in a cabin. I mean, that would never be of interest to me. And so I have very, I mean, the pilot of Space Command takes place, you know, on Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, the outer moons of Saturn and Jupiter. It's a very big scale, and but also, you know, the core thing is those characters and caring about those characters. And that's again where Elaine helps keep me grounded, because if the characters aren't working, then the script's not working, the show's not working. And Elaine will say, well, we gotta dig deeper into these people. And it's like, yes, absolutely. And but yeah, my ambition, well, we've already laid out the first season. We've written most of the first season, and as I say, we've recorded about the first half of that first season, and it would go beyond that. And then with the Showrunners Network, we're going to be doing 6 series, and then also doing features, Elaine's features, and you know, your mafia show. You'll be on Sicily, you know, hanging out with the guy.
Mark and Elaine, do you mind if I ask you guys a question about Space Command and the relationships? I'm curious.
Sure.
So many of our favorite shows are built on those relationships, the friendships, like on Deep Space Nine, Dr. Bashir and Miles O'Brien, such a fantastic friendship. With your show, with Space Command, what's coming out to you guys? Who are your favorite friendships right now that you're seeing in the show kind of emerge?
That's really interesting. Well, Doug Jones and Robert Picardo were just magical in the show. I mean, he's a mining foreman in the asteroid belt. Doug is a synthetic human in the asteroid belt who's kind of been condemned there, and Bob saves Doug's life. Doug is going to be thrown on the scrap heap and burnt. And Bob says, I think I can repair him. And then they embark on this incredible adventure together. So they're terrific in scenes together. And
I saw that scene and I wanted to dissect it. Like it felt so emotional. And then with like some of the spiritual factors kind of happening. And then later I saw the preview for the next part where he quotes Arthur C. Clarke, I think it is.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, what's going on here? So I'm always looking for the layers. That's what really interests me as, you know, someone who's enjoying the show, the layers of the show and seeing all that.
Yes. And I love that. I love
that picture.
Yeah, it's really swell.
That's a fantastic picture.
Yeah. I think it's a great picture.
That's good. That's going to be your Christmas card, right?
Yes. From series to you, but but also, you know, it's so they're terrific together. I love with Jack Cameron, where you get to meet with Captain Jack Cameron, Ethan McDowell. You get to meet his mother and father, and the mother's from Sri Lanka. And
I mean, the actress really is.
Mike Harney plays his father. Mike Harney is, of course, on Orange is the New Black and Project Blue Book, and then he forms a relationship with Captain Essex, you know, Sarah Marafino, and that leads where it goes. A very interesting, you know, thing, and also he's sort of a mentor to Cadet Bradbury, Lieutenant Bradbury, and so and he also has a history with Lieutenant Chilton, Nathaniel Freeman's character. So we're showing a totality of how these characters interact, and the fun part is just like in real life, they show different aspects of themselves to different people in their lives, you know, and so and those are growing and changing relationships. So it's very, very fun. And
is there someone we could look forward to, like on Next Generation? Some of my favorite characters were Q and Luoxana. They were these supporting characters, but my goodness, they could have had a whole series on their own. Well, in your show, do we have any fun oddball characters coming to stir the pot?
Yes. Ethan Phillips' character is going to be very eccentric, and
we love to create these characters. And the thing is that once the actor starts, we'll follow them.
Yes.
So as they start to build out, you know, so if they start to, like our Hispanic character,
Jorge Borges.
Yes. He started with his body language to be very protective of the captain, and we said, "Oh, great, okay, here we go." And so, you know, we always positioned him there, and started to, you know, go more into his backstory. So actors will also give us hints as we start to work with them.
Yes.
And they sometimes, you know, I say, well, what's going on there for you? And they'll tell us. So
well, the funny part is, as you mentioned earlier, because it's jumping through between generations, very interesting relationships. Like, for instance, Bob Picardo plays Armin Shimmerman's grandfather. Okay.
That's so cool.
And Armin Shimmerman's daughter will be played by Christina Moses of A Million Little Things. She also played Sulu's daughter in World Enough and Time, the episode we did, and she's of course amazing and mixed race, and and then, you know, Lieutenant Bradbury will have a daughter, and it just goes on with all these fascinating ripple effects. And that's why the pandemic episode was actually called Ripple Effect. And but it's very, very fun to see those relationships. We had actually in Ripple Effect, we actually had Jack Kemmer's grandson, Matt. Let's see, how did it work? Yeah, no, so it's Jack's son is Ed Kemmer, right? And in Ripple Effect, because that covered a whole, you know, span of time, we had 3 actors playing that role. So we got to see him, you know, as he
give the flow chart.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can get the flow chart. So we saw that character as a baby. Then we saw that character as a young man. And then J.G. Hertzler played him as an old man, J.G. Hertzler from Deep Space Nine. And so so that was huge fun. And then Bob Picardo's son also ends up with his great aunt, played by Barbara Bain. Yeah, we actually got so complicated in Ripple Effect.
You had to have a flow chart.
Let's see if I can get this on screen.
Oh, I want to see that.
This is the family tree of all of our characters. This is a poster that one can actually get. And it shows this character.
Wow, you can get that. That's great.
Yeah, but this character is related.
That is really something. Yeah. I love the cosmos behind it and everything.
Yes. And Bill Mumy, whom I met when I was 7, when he was on Lost in Space, you know, he plays this sort of wealthy inventor. He invents the synthetics, and his granddaughter will again be mixed race and will be this genius who takes over his company ultimately. So it's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to come. And you know, and Doug Jones, of course, is playing a viewpoint character, so he'll be through the entire series, the entire span of time on the show.
I'm curious. Oh,
go ahead, LJ. Go ahead.
I am curious because back to the action, back to the adventure, back to you saying how like you had all these special effects going. I love the cosmos. I am like the science nerd. I'm the one who's always watching how the universe works in cosmos. Are there any fun natural phenomenon that we might get to see? Supernovas or 2 neutrino stars coming together?
Yes. All of them. I mean, it's funny because one thing that I think it was Michael Kuda pointed out to me, he you know, we have, when we first start with Space Command, the ships are fusion drive and they're slower than light. So we can get around the solar system okay, but we can't get to other star systems.
Right.
Then they dig up this alien ship that's been buried for 2 million years. And 200 million, however, whatever I say in the script. And it's this vast, enormous, mile-long spaceship that's faster than light, ultimately. And so
that's how they get the technology. Interesting.
No, they don't get the technology that way. Because that you'll see when you see the first 2 hours.
Okay.
Ultimately, in the Great Solar War, we've structured Space Command as 2-hour stories that tell a larger story, and then the 2-hour stories can be split down the middle as hour-long episodes. So the first 2-hour story is Redemption, our pilot. The second 2-hour story, where we've shot the first hour, is Forgiveness. The third 2-hour story is Great Solar War, and fourth one is Empire, the one with Armin Shimmerman and Christina Moses, and then after that, the final 2 hours of the season are Harvester, and then the bonus episode is the bonus episode, Ripple Effect. But the point is that in Great Solar War, they develop, our guys have to go back and get that alien ship for various reasons, and we can't reach it. So Greg Mazzy, Bill Mumy's granddaughter, is building a prototype faster than light drive, but it's extremely dangerous and not not reliable at all. And they have to fit that drive into the Paladin and try and go where Doug Jones is taking.
Oh, that sounds very cool.
Right, and
that's an oh boy moment.
Right. And so we create something called M space, which is it's outside of physical space. It allows you to travel faster than light. And because the fascinating thing, there's this wonderful, you know, I'm a huge physics and nut as well, and astronomy nut as many of us are. And there's a very interesting area of science that has not been resolved yet, of course. And supposedly you can't go faster than light. Einstein,
the cosmic event horizon, right? Because space moves to its own rules.
Well, yes. Well, but the other part is that in quantum physics, they have the linked particles, and they found out that those linked particles are not limited by the speed of light. They're linked instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are, which means there is a flaw in the speed of light limitation. Because there's something in our physical universe. but they haven't yet been able. It's some, but they haven't yet been able to reconcile quantum physics, quantum physics with the larger Einsteinian
Theory
physics.
of relativity.
Right, the general field theory, whatever it's called, and but that's the next step. So there's some very interesting theories at work here, and so we play with all that stuff.
Sounds like fun.
It's very fun, and and again, you have to work it within a story where you care about the characters, because again, if you have someone spouting physics for 2 hours, that's an episode of Nova. That's not, that's not our show. But yeah, we're very, very cognizant. I have a lot of conversations with scientists and all of that. Yes, that's absolutely.
Quantum field theory.
Quantum, it was the general. It'll come to me, okay. But it's the thing that Einstein could never crack, because he was trying to reconcile the two, and he said, God does not roll dice with the universe, but they do, So, but anyway, so there's that.
I want to remind everybody to go ahead and sub to Mr. Sci-Fi. That's Mark's channel, and Mark and Elaine both appear on there. And there's a lot of great content on there if you go ahead and start looking through the old videos.
Yes. And we also, just to answer one little postscript to your question, is we also deal with some very interesting astronomical stuff relating to how you survive on different planets. So, for instance, we create this religious group called the Children of Job, and part of their belief system, they're spread throughout the solar system, part of their belief system is that sometime in their life they have to make a pilgrimage to the Iron City on Mercury, because there's a crater in Mercury with ice. The sun never gets down to the bottom of it, so water ice at the bottom. So the Children of Job mine the iron ore and ship it to the outer planets and moons, and so they have built a city in that ice, in amongst that ice, and
that's so cool and true to science. That's so cool.
Yes, and then of course we're dealing with Titan. We have a battle on Titan in the pilot where the human the human freedom fighters have to kludge together spacesuits, and whereas the synthetics, the armies that are sort of the mercenaries hired by the British, don't have to wear spacesuits at all, because they're synthetic humans. They don't breathe. So it's fun, very fun.
Mark, do you want to tell people again how they can volunteer to work with Space Command?
Yes, there are a number of ways you can help with Space Command, because the whole world is our family, and our team, and so obviously we have a Kickstarter campaign going now, and we're raising the money to finish the VFX and post on the 2nd hour and roll camera on the 4th hour, not including the bonus episode, but so money helps enormously. You can also buy investment shares for $7,500 each, and that helps enormously. But beyond that, if you want to build a spacesuit, if you want to build a robot, if you want to build a ray gun, if you want to build a spaceship set, if you're good at visual effects and want to contribute your services, there's a million ways to do it. And we also have acting roles. And again, you can go on the Kickstarter campaign and have a walk-on or something, but that's not the only way we cast people.
Two of our key people are in different countries.
Yes. Well, our VFX team is in Chile and Europe and here, and our actors. Yes, our actors are in Canada and the UK and Atlanta and here. So it's amazing things can happen when you just open yourself to everyone and say, it's like that great line in Aliens where Sigourney Weaver says, "I feel like a bit like a fifth wheel. Is there anything I can do?" And the sergeant says, "I don't know. Is there anything you can do?" And she says, "Well, I can work that loader." So it's like, so if you want to build an alien spaceship set, our studio's in Pico Rivera, which is just south of Los Angeles. But if you're not in Los Angeles, again, seriously, if you want to build a spacesuit, we're going to have a spacesuit contest very soon where we'll have those categories of like steampunk spacesuit, scientifically realistic spacesuit made for under $100 entirely from parts from Lowe's or Home Depot. It's going to be fun. So
I want to also just add something to anybody who is a potential investor. To be clear, because people ask these questions all the time, considering what they're seeing is happening with some of the major franchises. Yes. Mark has made it very clear that he does not intend to lose control of Space Command. Do you want to talk about that, Mark?
No. Yeah. I mean, it's more likely I'll lose control of my bladder than I'll lose control of Space Command, frankly. But don't from your hand again. No. The reason I'm doing Space Command this way is, again, because I can. Let me see. I'm trying to angle the Spock spacesuit. There we go. the reason I'm doing Space Command in this way, and then we'll go back to just a nice two-shot, is because I don't want it to be screwed up. Elaine and I are basically the at the top of the food chain in this, and so it's like everything you see in Space Command we've signed off on. Okay, there's nothing where no one outranks us. we're very collaborative. So if someone has a great idea, we'll say sure, let's try that. But no, we're in charge of this, and that's the beginning and end of it. I'm not, we'll see what the future brings, but I'm not planning to hand it over to some moron to wreck. So it's. I really
like your quote from the last interview about how if something wasn't going right in your work, if something wasn't going in the direction that you thought it was probably because you gave away that power. You gave it away,
and I talk about that in Greenlighting Yourself in the new book, because the moment you give away power, you have not only given away your ability to make things the way you want them to, but you've given away the right to complain because you gave away power. And if you don't want to give away power, then make it yourself. Keep power. It's like the only time when you have power is when you have power. You take responsibility and you don't give it away. The moment you give it away, it's gone. And then the person, go ahead.
No, it's amazing too, because like you said, we have Kickstarter now to help us to fund these amazing projects that might have been made, but not necessarily made the way you wanted it to be made. And that's happened a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you guys ever read Dean Koontz? Just going to throw the name out there. He had this series called Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Amazing. All the time I'm watching it. I'm like, it might get made. It might not get made. It never got made because he gave away too much, but he had just enough power to pull the plug if he didn't like what was being made.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you guys are doing this and pushing forward and giving us good sci-fi to look forward to.
Yeah, well, thank you. But also the thing that's unusual about us and really sets us apart from most people is that we've been on the inside of that world, the studio network world. And we've been very grateful. I mean, I when I was producing Sliders and writing for that show, I was very lucky. Thanks. I was very lucky to have good executives. I've had many good executives who were on the same page and who loved what we were doing, and that's terrific. And by the way, an executive doesn't just have to love what I'm doing to be creative and intelligent and part of the team. I mean, I like to be challenged. I like to have people say, why is this the way it is, or could I mean, good suggestions are welcomed. But having been inside that world, I can see how good science fiction shows do get made when you have the right people aboard. But that's a roll of the dice, because when the studio and the network are writing the checks, ultimately you have to dance to their tune, and
sometimes there are some important, you're with good people and there's a power shift.
Yes. And they're gone, and the show chain takes a left turn. But we're very lucky that there have been so many good science fiction shows. But even with Twilight Zone, it was good because Rod Serling took responsibility and took power, and he turned down I think it was a $1 or $2 million movie contract he had with MGM. He got out of that contract so he could do Twilight Zone. And back then, $1 million was a lot of money back in 1958. And but again, he was willing to stake everything he had, and if it had been canceled after the first few episodes, it would have been canceled. He knew that, but he was willing to put his heart and soul into things, and it worked.
Mark and Elaine, for clarity's sake, Nerdporial Lifeform asks, how do you watch Space Command?
Well, you for now, you can watch it on Mr. Sci-Fi, which is my YouTube channel. So if you go there, I've just posted the first hour, and this is an announcement. Tomorrow we'll be posting a sneak peek of the first 10 minutes of the second hour, and so it's really, really cool. And it won't have the final color correction, the final sound design, but it's got everything plugged in, and it's really cool. A lot happens in that 10 minutes, and but you can watch it on Mr. Sci-Fi. You can watch the prequel, the animatic of the prequel. You can watch the first hour, the pilot. You can watch Ripple Effect, which is our 2-hour pandemic episode. You can even listen to me read Grizzled Space Jockey, the story about my character in Space Command, the character that I play. And I wear, if you look behind me, there's a real spacesuit, a gray one that was used on Twilight Zone. I wear that. My mom got that for me when I was 12, and I wear that in Space Command. So that's where you can watch it. Now, we are in conversations with Amazon and Netflix and many of the other platforms, and we have some. Well, I'm looking for. By the way, people say, "Well, when is Space Command going to sell, or why hasn't it sold?" What I'm looking for is someone who's just crazy about science fiction and understands it. I worked on a number of shows. I was in the office with the president of the Sci-Fi Channel many years ago, not the one who's the current one, when he said to me, in all candor, he said, I've tried to watch Babylon 5 and I just don't get it. I can't understand it. And I've tried to watch Sliders and I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And it's like obvious. Wow. There was an obvious thing to say, which I couldn't say, which is you shouldn't be in this job. You should because if you don't understand science fiction, why the hell are you the head of the Sci-Fi Channel? And then, of course, you would say to the fans, and they would say, well, that explains a lot, but again, so I'm looking for the executive who knows. I mean, I'll give you a great example. I just had a wonderful Zoom meeting with an executive at Amazon that I've gotten very friendly with. And we started talking science fiction. He loves what we're doing. And as a present, just as, because he had just moved to a new apartment, and as a housewarming present, I'd had a conversation with him to find out who his two favorite science fiction writers back in the day were. And so I sent him a signed first edition of Left Hand of Darkness and a first edition of The Man in the High Castle. And he was over the moon because that was meaningful to him. I'm looking for the executives where that would be meaningful, where they understand why science fiction is important and they're not going to muck it up. And he's going to introduce us to the whole science fiction and fantasy team. And I didn't send him those things as a bribe, at all. I sent it to him because I knew he would be thrilled, as I would be thrilled if someone sent something like that to me. And thanks to eBay, those weren't expensive, but God bless eBay, but it was like you find people. I've always said to Elaine about her films, you need to find your tribe. And it's the people who are on your wavelength. And that's where science fiction conventions and science fiction fandom and the internet are so vital for all of us, because you're only an oddball until you find all the other oddballs. Mm-hmm. And
then you're the coolest guy in the room.
then you're with your family, and so that's why I love science fiction. It's been very kind to me.
I want to thank you both for your time, and any final words, Elaine, Mark?
Wait, I have a question. Don't go yet.
Yes.
Okay. This is just something that's been burning in my head. Okay.
Yes.
I don't even know if you're going to be able to answer, but yes. I know that you contributed greatly to Deep Space Nine, which far beyond the stars. Oh my goodness, in my heart always. Mm-hmm. Okay, now some silliness.
Sure.
At Quark's bar.
Yes.
They had a patron, Morn.
Yes.
Who was constantly sitting across, and he even got to have his own little episode, which was fantastic. Who mourns for Morn? Love. Yes. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to connect the dots here with me, but there's another show called Bob's Burgers. Have you ever heard of it? In Bob's Burgers, there's a character, Teddy. And I swear when my family and I watch it, we look at Teddy and we go, that's Morn. If you ever have the chance to watch it or comment on it in the future, I would love to see if you think that they were in any way, shape, or form inspired by Morn's character on Deep Space Nine for this character, Teddy. I'm sure they were,
because most of us who make science fiction shows or even mainstream shows are huge science fiction fans, particularly Star Trek, Twilight Zone, all that stuff. When I did the Twilight Zone commentaries, I did commentaries with, Matt Weiner, who created Mad Men, and many other, people, Joe Dougherty, who was the executive producer on Pretty Little Liars, because they're enormous Twilight Zone fans and Star Trek fans. So when you see those kind of references, or when you see a show where they're casting all the Star Trek actors, even if it's a lawyer show, it's clear that the guy who runs that show loves Star Trek. And so I'm sure that's not a coincidence. And the funny part was that I actually wrote for Armin Shimmerman before we ever met or knew each other. I wrote for the Ron Perlman Beauty and the Beast. I wrote the last script ever commissioned, and Armin Shimmerman played a character on that show. And I totally didn't know that until later when they did the pilot of Deep Space Nine, and I saw the pilot, and I loved Quark. And my friend Les Landau was a director on the show, and I said, can you introduce me to him? And he brought me onto the set, and the first time I met Armin, he was in full Quark regalia, and but though between takes he would take out the teeth. And I said, and they're really sharp. And I said, do you ever bite yourself with those teeth? And he said, all the time.
Oh my goodness!
But we became fast friends, and yeah, it was
I'm
great.
Looking forward to seeing his role. He said he plays a royal on your show,
he plays an emperor.
An emperor. Oh, that's like right up. I feel like that's right up his alley.
Yeah. And he's quite wonderful. He does a monologue as that character in Ripple Effect in the pandemic episode, and he's just wonderful. And I've always tried to find a role for Armin in everything I do because he's just so so wonderful. And there's a pilot Elaine and I wrote called Magic Time that I then did as a trilogy of novels for HarperCollins, and there's a role I wrote specifically for Armin. So Christina Moses and Armin and I and Elaine are going to be doing Magic Time as part of that 6 series.
Mark, one really quick question.
Yeah.
With the Lucille Ball comment, how come nobody has ever thought of involving Lucille's daughter? She was an actress in Star Trek. How come she's never?
It's a good idea.
Offered?
It's a good idea. I think people forget that Lucille Ball was instrumental in Star Trek. You know, she thought that was a show about some actresses in the USO tour. If you remember, Star Trek, she thought it was actresses during World War II, and they had to disabuse her of that notion. I don't know if you know that story when she greenlit the pilot, but the one of my favorite things about all that, I think I mentioned to you last time, PJ, is that when they do Strange New Worlds, it'll be the first time that a show where the pilot was shot in 1964 got greenlit in 2021. I think that's just amazing and wonderful. And but it's a good idea. It's a very good idea, and they should do that. And I mean, the more that I can honor our traditions, the better. You know, that's why I loved doing a scene with Nichelle Nichols. You know, that was why, for me, as a 10-year-old who met her and went on the original Star Trek set, and she was so kind to me, to then go full circle all these years later and be able to have her be in Space Command was just, you know, I'm still that little boy. You know, there's that. I mean, Ray Bradbury I was once at his place. I used to go over there about once a month for over a decade. And at one point we were sitting on chairs opposite each other in his room filled with all the things from his career. And he said, "I have a secret to tell you." And he motioned me close, and he leaned close, and I leaned close. And at the time he was almost 90, and he whispered to me, "I'm 13 years old." And he was inside. And that was the child self that he wrote from, that sense of delight in everything. And all of us who are science fiction fans, I think, still have that wonder, that sense of wonder from that delighted little boy or little girl.
Hey, Elaine, any final comment on your end?
Just I so appreciate this community, because right now we're in the middle of a time where people are manipulating fear and turning people inward, and it's me, mine against those people over there.
Right.
That in this community we have so many people who have the courage to care, and the
reach
courage
out.
and to reach out and create community. And so I really appreciate the fact that that this is one way for people like us to connect.
Yeah, and for me, what I would say is, you know, if you haven't seen Space Command, go to Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube, watch the first hour, and watch the 10 minutes of the second hour that we're going to post tomorrow. And if you love it, which I think you will, you know, go to our Kickstarter campaign and you know, and do whatever helps us get where we're going, because you know, we're making it by hand, you know, entirely by hand. So, but thanks so much for being there, and this is a thrill for us, an honor, you know.
Well, again, I want to thank you and Elaine for being here, and thank you so much, LJ, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you again.
Yes,
my friend.
It's great to meet you.
Don't forget, everybody, to go and watch Mr. Sci-Fi. Stay tuned with what's going on with Mark and Elaine. Probably one of the best ways to do it is to sub to Mr. Sci-Fi, and don't forget to go ahead and support. There's different levels of support, so there's something there for everybody. Go ahead and support Space Command on Kickstarter. And I want to thank again Elaine, Mark, LJ. Some of our panelists got ill and were not able to join us, so shout out to them. Thank you, Time Prophet, Nerdporial, Nate, William Jackson, Galinda, Ward Dogheim, everybody who has been in here, Fandom Outsider, Prophet, Gap, everybody, thank you. Everybody stay safe, and we will be back tomorrow with Dark Matter Monday with Joe Malazzi, and we may have a few surprises there tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll be great. Well, thanks, guys. We've really enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again soon. And you know,
stay safe,
stay well. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.